Welcome back to the show, Unbroken, Stories of Resilience with Sam Davis. I've been an interventionist for over 14 years. I have helped over 1,000 families in a formal intervention setting, and I've worked with countless others, helping them get on the path of recovery and sobriety. I absolutely love putting out content and carrying a message, and I want to talk about some deep stuff with people who have been in the ditch and have come out and are now living a life of abundance. We're not quite to celebrity guest status yet, but we've got some special guests. The lady I've got here today, Lindsay Force, I've known even before I sobered up. I met her in Texas over 15 years ago. She's a powerhouse. She's funny. She's lovable. She's got a strong story. And let's hear what she's got to say. Lindsay, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Oh, it's glad to have you. Glad to have you. We've been through quite a bit, haven't we?
We have.
Through the years. So where are you from and what do you do?
I am originally from Baltimore, Maryland. And
Be more Murderland.
yeah, man. It's hard to go back there, you know. I love Baltimore and I have a lot of love for it, but from a distance, you know. It's hard to say I'm from Baltimore sometimes because I really feel like I was born in Austin, Texas, you know.
The rebirth.
Yeah, the rebirth. And I spent a long time there, and I spent, you know, half of the time I was there, I was high and hitting a bottom, and the second half was, you know, climbing my way out. So it's a really special place for me. But yeah, originally from Baltimore, Maryland, lived here in Virginia for quite a few years, bounced around when I was young, and eventually landed in Austin, Texas. So
what was it like being Lindsay when you were little? When you not so much when you were little, but when you were coming along and became introduced to the things we're introduced to.
Sure. I come from a family that is, you know, we're middle class. You know, we were lower middle class when I was younger, and my parents worked hard and worked their way up to middle class, which is where we still sit. I have an older sister, younger brother, and I definitely have middle child syndrome. I definitely have always felt, you know, not really quite sure where I belonged or where I fit. So yeah, I think that, you know, looking back, and I mean, that's part of the gift of recovery is we get to really explore our past experiences through a new lens. You know what I'm saying? Like, we lived it in one way, in delusional thinking, in fear, you know, all those things. But as you wake up, you get to look back on that very same experience in a new way.
You know, I get what you're saying on that. I was looking back through a photo album from when I was a child.
Yeah.
And I had this idea and this belief that I was just so fat. I was so self-conscious about my weight, and I hated the way I looked. I hated the way I remember it was a constant thought in my head. And I looked back through that photo album last year, and I was looking at this little kid that was me. I'm like, oh, you weren't fat. You were just a normal kid.
Mm-hmm.
You're just a normal kid. So I get it. Like, we live in this dream world, and then the gift of recovery, when we snap out of it and we awaken, we can look back on it with a different viewpoint.
Absolutely.
Like, oh, yeah, okay.
Yep.
All right. There's where my thinking's delusional.
Correct. Perspective really is what everything hinges on, you know? And not only that, but I'm comparing my insides to your outsides. The world of today, it is a lot about feelings. And I think there is some good in that. I do. I think there is some good in that, but I think that there's that it can be abused too, you know, and overused and used as a crutch, because feelings aren't facts.
Not at all.
And man, I have done a lot of things based on thinking feelings are facts.
Yeah. They're really the most temporary and fluid of
Yes.
our entire existence.
Yes.
The feelings.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
my needs of what I actually need are going to
Mhm.
be pretty consistent.
Yep.
But my feelings are going to be all over the place
Right.
day to day.
And it's a short list of needs.
Yeah. What
And-
first use look like?
Really, the change in the way I feel thing started with cigarettes. and stealing cigarettes from my mom or any family member,
Same.
really. Yeah. When you're first smoking, nicotine gave you a buzz, So that's where it started for me. And then the next kind of step was alcohol, but in very small amounts. It was family gatherings. We would steal one beer and share it. And then first use of marijuana started, I think probably when I was 13, maybe 14, probably 13. And I didn't have like a huge physical experience as much as the emotional experience of hiding, of doing something bad, of doing something that I had heard about. But, and I think really for me, I was addicted to that a lot, to the rush of lying, of getting away with something. And it took off pretty quickly after that for me. By 15, I was in a full-blown world war with my mother, was dating and lying and rebelling. And the fallout of that really changed the trajectory of my family. I ended up moving away and living with my father and back in Baltimore, and everything changed.
Do you think your mom had strong boundaries from the get-go? Were they healthy boundaries?
Yeah, I think so. I think I don't give her enough credit. If I look at it, objectively, and that I'm not the child in the scenario, then I can say she has good boundaries. It felt hurtful in the moment. I felt like she was abandoning me.
If it was communicated differently and not out of anger, which we know anger is the bodyguard of fear.
For sure.
So it comes out sideways.
Absolutely.
If the communication would have been a little different and her explaining in more of a healthy way.
Yes.
Of this is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
Would you have felt abandoned? Or it's not like you would have been, oh, well, that makes perfect sense.
No, but
I
do think that it was because she didn't have a Sam Davis to help her navigate how to hold boundaries. She was just built that way.
I envy that.
That's just literally how she was. But it was coming from a place of anger.
She was afraid.
Absolutely. And that's that perspective piece, right? But in the moment, for me, being an overly emotional person, right, and knowing I had lied, knowing I'd done something bad, but then basically being told, you can stay here and suffer the consequences, or you can move out. I chose to not suffer the consequences.
I'll show you.
Yep. And there was a lot of spite in that decision.
But the consequences came anyway.
Yes, they did. My month into 11th grade year in high school, I moved back to Baltimore to live with my father, my bio dad, as I like to call him. He didn't really know what to do. He did his best. And again, no blame, but these are straight facts we're talking about right now.
He's a human with a human condition. He's a human
with a human condition and with alcoholism. The only way he knew how to connect was to try to be my friend in that moment. And I was broken. I was terrified. I was scared. And he did not handle that. I mean, I don't think many people would, Initially, I wasn't getting what I needed, but then I started to know I could take advantage of that. And I did, and we were friends, and he did allow me to do kind of what I wanted, He held some boundaries a few times when school called or other people got involved. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I started taking on a different persona.
And what did that look like? Some examples. I mean, where did it take you?
I think at 19, I was a full-blown everyday cocaine addict by 19. I tried to do some community college. I moved to Hawaii for a little bit, lived in Hawaii for about a year. Right after 9/11, I moved and lived with some friends out there. I was just kind of chasing something.
I mean, to get as far away from this as possible.
Yes.
And then there you were. Mm-hmm. Because you went with you.
Yes, and I did, and it blew up. I blew up those relationships. I've never spoken to those people again, and they were some of my best friends. I've tried to reach out in recovery, make amends, but they have been unwilling to talk to me. And also remember in this time from 16 years old to 19, my family, my family unit was here, and I was in Baltimore, and they were just kind of watching from afar as I like descended. And, you know, I would try to keep in touch. I would come back sometimes, but I was already like my reality was starting to change in Maryland. So when I would come back here, it would be so jarring. Like I was such a different person already. I didn't fit here anymore. And they were like, "You're not okay." And I was like, "Well, I can't come back here anymore." And that was the choice. That was like, I'm just never going to come back then.
When you can look at it now,
yeah,
there's no way we could see it then. There's
no,
no way
no.
that our denial and even our own survival instincts wouldn't allow us, because denial is sort of a survival instinct, right?
For sure.
So how do you think they really handled that internally when they were watching that unfold?
Yeah, I think they were devastated. Alcoholism, I was 19 years old, not even of legal drinking age, and I was a full-blown alcoholic. Yeah. When I would put alcohol into my body, I did not know what was going to happen.
Right. You couldn't say for certainty when you popped that
Absolutely
top
not.
where the night was going to take
Absolutely not. And I bet it all on that. I knew, and I let everything go to the wayside. And so when I think about my family, they had no idea that I was alcoholic. They didn't know what that was. They had not been educated on alcoholism or addiction. I'm sure they thought I might have an issue, but they didn't know what that meant really. And they were taking it so personally. They were thinking, God, she's got some really mental issues, you know. Yeah. I remember hearing the whispers, you know. Yeah. So I'm sure that it was, and they had 2 other kids to think about too. Yeah. You know.
And you know, part of them were like, where did we go wrong? Mm-hmm. What is our, I guess, is our fault? There was some of that chatter in their head, you know it was.
Absolutely. And I know, you know, I do know that now, and her admission to me that she always feared she made the wrong decision by letting me go. I was able to release her from that. Yeah. You know, that this is not, I would have gone anyway. It's such a gift, the process of amends and you know, I really did initially stepping into that process think it was about me setting it right. You know, like it was real selfish. I was going to feel better. You know, I'm going
to be free from this.
I'm going to be humble, you know.
Let me show you how humble I am.
Exactly.
Hold tight.
Yeah. And I remember having the realization that watching the change in the face and the body language, the loosening, watching someone let go of something they didn't even know they were carrying. Yeah. And I remember my mom just saying, like, I thought I failed you. And I was like, no. Side note, my parents did a lot of their own work. When I was struggling, when I first got sober, my parents started going to Families Anonymous. They worked the 12 steps. They chaired meetings. They did their own work.
It's a continuous theme through just about any family recovery story is the family started doing their own work.
Yep.
You know? So what did it look like? I mean, you had gone to Texas because that's where real dad had ended up in Texas. And so you're in good old Texas, the great state of Texas, wonderful state. I got a lot of love for that state.
Sure.
And you do as well.
I do.
For the same reasons.
Yep.
But leading up to that pivotal moment of where life changed, what did it look like? I mean, help us understand that.
Sure. You know, my dad had left already and moved back to Texas, and he left me, quote unquote, in Maryland, in Baltimore, and I needed him. He was my chief enabler. By this time, I was about to be 21, and I was in full-blown crack addiction.
Cracking that cane.
Yeah. And homeless, I drove around a old Dodge Caravan minivan. The back windows busted out. It didn't have no seats in it, so that we could just load motherfuckers in there. I'm sorry. I don't know if I should cuss or not.
Yeah, you good.
Okay.
You good.
And it was demolished. That vehicle was demolished, and that was like the last thing I had, and it just broke down. And I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And I kind of got to a little place of willingness.
Mm-hmm.
Now I didn't know what that meant,
Mm-hmm.
but I just thought I just need to stop using cocaine. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll just get my life together. And then, so I could reach out to my dad. I said, if you don't let me come live there, I'm going to die. So
Manipulation there.
Gave him an ultimatum, but I felt it. I felt that, I wasn't even 21 years old. And I had nothing and no one. I was a ghost. I had no identification. I'd lost all that. He put me on a Greyhound bus.
Baltimore to Texas.
Oh, man. It was the worst traveling experience of my life. I did have a little bit of fun, though. There's a couple spots we stopped. That was fun. But it was rough. And but I made it. I made it to Texas. And I remember, I always talk about this. I remember I showed up to the Greyhound bus station off 290, right in Austin. The irony is that's where I ended up being in my deepest parts of my addiction. But I showed up to that bus station. It was late at night. It was Thanksgiving holiday. I guess it was 2002, maybe 3. And I thought there would just be more people there waiting for me. Maybe my cousins or something.
Oh, Lindsay's coming to town.
Lindsay's coming.
But they're like, man, that Lindsay's coming from Baltimore.
They didn't show up. The only person that was there was my dad. And not only was he there, but he was dead asleep. And when I stepped off the bus, I heard someone snoring, and it was my father. And, so I had this idea. And again, I talked about that because it is this self-importance, egomaniac with an inferiority complex. I mean, that is me to a T. Really, I really thought y'all should show up for me, but I'm a piece of shit. You know what I mean? Like, it was like this warring, this war going on.
Because you were relying on them.
Yes.
To smash that belief that you had in yourself. You were expecting them to do that.
For sure. And, God bless my dad. He was there. He was asleep and he was tired. It's 10 o'clock on a Wednesday. But he was there and he picked me up, and the plan was for me to go to treatment, Austin Recovery. I had a small suitcase. I had a couple rolls of quarters, for the snacks and the cigarettes. And I got to my dad's apartment, and I called Austin Recovery the next day. It was right around, like I said, Thanksgiving, and they were like, we're all full up, and call back next Friday, and you got to keep calling, though. We're not going to call you. You have to show that you're willing. So I made it 1 week, one call. I called the next Friday, still full. And they said, call back next Friday, and never called again.
Like, that's it.
I started drinking. I thought Budweiser and marijuana is fine. I did believe that. I did in that moment. And again.
And, I believe in how they did that, of like, you've got to show willingness by calling us.
For sure.
And that's why I am strongly against, like, I work in behavioral health, and I know of treatment centers that call someone every single day. When they make that first inquiry call, the admissions teams are ordered to call that individual back every single day. When the individual has to show, if they're not willing to make the call or call back, there's no way, even if you do get them in your treatment program, that they're going to be willing to do the work.
Yeah.
So then it's obvious to me that that procedure or policy is just about, got to get them in here, got to fill this bed, got to fill this bed. And they'll play that crap like, no, we just want to make them, we just want to show that we're concerned and this and that. But
once I got to Texas, I tried to navigate. I ended up moving in with my cousin. I got a job at old Slick Willie's. Pool
What's
hall.
a slick wheel? Oh, the pool hall.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right.
Oh, Slick Willies.
I mean, I don't know if there's a better name for a
I'm
pool
telling
hall
you.
than Slick Willie.
I'm telling you, it was good too. It was a good little spot, and I burned it all down. I got kicked out of my cousin's house. He had to put all my stuff out in the driveway because I said I wouldn't use drugs, and I did, and I meant that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were okay with Budweiser marijuana, but nothing hard, no hard drugs.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's fine.
I can do that.
I can maintain.
Yeah, no worries. And you had full intention.
I did have full intention, and it was a great spot, beautiful house. You know, lived with a couple dudes, and they were chill, a little dirty sometimes, but you know, not a lot of drama. You know, great setup. Burn that down. Pretty much from there, I spiraled out for the last 2.5 years of my addiction. I mean, were the depths of hell. You know, I crossed every line. You know, I had all these intentions of showing up for family, and I barely spoke to my family here in Richmond. We pretty much those relationships went dark. You know,
and we don't really realize that. It's just in our mind, like looking back on my life, and those, like, there's a couple of years that are really blurry to me. Like extremely blurry. For sure. Like I don't know why I lived in this certain location that I lived in for very briefly. I couldn't tell you what year that was. I couldn't tell you like what happened leading up to it or what happened afterward. It's because it's like this tornado in our head. Like I don't have the bandwidth to think about my family back home, or because it's just constant chaos around me that I'm just trying to. Like, it's like walking through a minefield. I'm trying to avoid the minefields. You got a soldier out in the minefield. He may be thinking about home, but more importantly, he's thinking about how do I not step on this mine, you know?
Yeah, trying to keep my feet.
It's,
you know?
It's exhausting.
It is exhausting. I agree. I feel like we just become so far removed from normalcy. We become really like animalistic, right? Just the few things that I need to, you know, I need drugs.
First and foremost.
I need to keep getting high. I need money, right? And then the other things that fall behind that, I need comfort, because you do at some point, and that can be anything. That can be drugs. That can be, you know what I mean? I mean, for me, it was usually a man or a situation where I could stay where they were, you know what I mean? So that part, those needs were being met, right? That I'm not out on the street. But eventually that went away too. And that's what I'm saying. I crossed every single line. You know, I became homeless. I was doing the hotel shuffle for a long time. And for those that don't know what that is, it's moving from one hotel to the other every 1 to 3 days. And it is exhausting. And if you don't have identification, you got to get someone to get that room for you. And that's a whole nother hustle in and of itself. And it was hard, you know. And eventually all roads lead to prostitution, to selling the only thing you have left, which is your body. And as a woman, mostly, I'm not to say that there aren't male prostitutes. Of course there are, but, you know, it's a high demand out there. You know, that was the beginning of the end for me. In the last 2 years of my addiction, I was a shell of a person, you know, and I would have these high highs, which really just means I have a bunch of money and dope in my pocket. That's it. And I have a hotel room and I got a shower and I look cute. I got some clothes from Goodwill or whatever. Or I went shopping at a real place, but I don't actually want to go to a real place because I feel like everyone's looking at me and I can't really exist in the normal world. Right. I am the part of the seedy underbelly. Right. That's the truth. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So. Like you're like fish out of water. We're fish out of water around normal people. Yes. In normal situations.
Yes. And, you know, people talking about, oh, you just need to change people, places, and things. Why don't you go out? Why don't you go hang out with Ryan? Yeah. Well, man, how the hell am I going to go hang out with Ryan? What am I going to do? Go to the tee off on the third tee box and talk about, man, like I smoked $800 worth of crack 2 nights ago. You know, like I can't relate. I can't talk about current events. My current events is how am I going to hustle $300 for my family just to get through the night, you know? Yeah, and I had no frame of reference on like what was going on in the world.
You know, my existence was the only one that I was that I had any buy-in for, and that the hunger to get high.
Yeah.
You
It's
know,
that survival.
yes.
Me think about those guys and ladies down in Western North Carolina right now when
Mhm.
Helene went through and dumped 3 feet of water.
Yep.
Like, they are not thinking about what's going on in Ukraine. They're not thinking about it is survival
Yep.
in this moment right here. And
Right.
that's how it is for us.
It
out there.
is. And it's very hard to explain that to loved ones, because obviously their life goes on some level for them. They continue to change and shift, but we're paralyzed in place, you know, and so like things grow up around us, but we're not really part of that. So it's such a jolt, you know, when we do get sober and we do have to like re-entry is painful, you know. It's like the astronauts coming back from space. You know, you got to go through all the different layers, you know, and it's hard.
Yeah. I remember going into treatment for my last time down in Texas. That Texas recovery is stuff, isn't it? Solid. But, you know, I was in there for a long time, so we really get to know the rest of the residents there. And I remember they were talking about The Office, the show The Office. I'm like, what are y'all talking about? I remember they were talking about Facebook. Facebook had just come out.
Sure.
I'm like, I've never even heard of that.
Sure.
Like, they had an iPhone, and I'm like, I don't know. What? I mean, seriously. I was
hear
like,
you.
Where have I been?
I know. Well, I think I've told you this story when I got that first real job in sobriety at Mark Houston Recovery, you know, and I got promoted to a program director, and they put me in this new office, beautiful, up on a hill, facing the woods. I'm like, do they know who I am? You know, but I remember they said, go ahead and get onto your computer.
Get on to it? You want me to sit on it or climb up on it?
So I'm hitting the monitor. I'm like, but it's green. You know what I'm saying? And then I remember I finally admitted defeat.
Right.
And put my ego aside and was like, my computer's not working. I think it was Tracy who came in and was like, this is your computer, this tower.
Right.
This is the computer.
You're punching the screen.
It's just a monitor where you see it. But this is that brain. I was like, oh, got it, you know.
Gotcha.
But like I didn't know how technology was foreign. All the world had gone on, you know. But yeah, the process of getting sober is basically December 23rd, 2007. I was going to do one more call before Christmas.
One more call. Right.
To make some money, to get some Christmas presents.
Right.
For myself.
Right.
This is my Christmas present to myself. One more job.
Right.
Before Christmas. And because I had this moment where I was like, oh man, it's about to be Christmas, and it's like weird, you know, holidays aren't the same out there. Every day is the same. You just grinding and trying to get money to get more, and that's it. And you deal with the fallout of that, the emotional, the physical, all these different physical things happen to me, you know, and you just keep going. I decided to do one more. I set it up. And I showed up, and it was a setup. It was a setup through Williamson County, Texas. I was an undercover police officer, and as soon as the money was exchanged, police came out of every orifice in the house, upstairs, bathroom, kitchen. I popped up from the kitchen.
Right to garbage.
Peekaboo. I was like, oh,
man,
and descended, you know, and. I remember there was a cooler sitting, the apartment was relatively empty. I was like, you just moving in?
Right.
My gut was screaming at me, but I needed the money.
Yeah.
And, you know?
Right.
And I was
kind of like that rabbit going into the trap. You know, the rabbit knows it. But something ain't right here, but I got to have that lettuce. Right.
They had been cranking these out all day.
Right.
Not only did I learn that, but there were 6 people upstairs already arrested. as they were
here come
doing.
another one.
Yes, be quiet. If you make a noise, we'll charge you with another charge for obstruction of justice or whatever.
Yeah.
So I was part of a big sweep, and
On Christmas Eve.
the day before Christmas Eve, the 23rd of December.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yep. So you rolling up on Christmas, the only ho, ho, ho you got was ho, 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 you under arrest, ho.
Yes.
Right?
It was.
Right?
I was under arrest.
It is what it is,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
So that was it. That was the beginning. That was the beginning of the of my life being saved. And
Shit was dark
it was dark.
that day.
It was really dark. But I do want to say this, that I was so devoid of emotion because I was not connected to myself at all. So, yes, it was dark. I would say really the darkest point was about 30 days later. But that moment of I was so detached. I didn't even cry when I was arrested. And I was taken to jail. I spent Christmas Eve in booking. It was freezing in there. They keep it cold, keep the germs down,
Yeah, and they give you a little bitty blanket.
Little blanket. We were puppy piled on top of each other. It was like 4 or 5 of us. And I was like, let's just huddle together, guys. And we did. For heat. I mean, it was freezing. And then Christmas Day, I was released into the pod. And that's where my story began, About 60 days in, I was moved to the old jail. So I was no longer in this, like, big, bright pod. I was in, like, an actual jail cell with 5 other women, little table cemented to the floor, 1 bathroom, 3 bunk beds, 4 bunk beds. And that's where the change happened for me. I was like, oh, shit, I'm in jail. I'm not in like a big gymnasium with some bunk beds.
Yeah, I'm not in a shelter.
Right.
I'm in jail.
I'm in jail.
Right.
And I remember too that we were connected to this other 8-person cell, and the woman that was there was a woman that was in that one too. The reason I was moved because the case was considered high profile because I was on the news. My face was on the news,
Were the rest of the 6?
Yeah, all of us were on the news. Yep. And my dad saw me on the news for prostitution, So talk about worlds colliding.
Yeah.
He didn't know.
Yeah.
Or if he did, he didn't let on, But I remember there was a girl next to me. We were all kind of in these 2 cells because our cases were considered high profile. That really just means if you were on the news or whatever. It doesn't necessarily mean anything other than that. But she was on the news. She was on like 2020 she was an addict, heroin addict, and she had a newborn baby, and she nodded out and she suffocated her own child. And the 2020 episode aired when we were side by side, and her wails,
Oh, God.
her crying,
And that's just it's horrific, and definitely some consequences follow that. But knowing what I know and you knowing what you know,
yeah,
she was just a suffering individual.
Yes. And to hear someone who is no longer physically dependent on these drugs, the raw truth, right, is in her face. And not only that, but it's airing nationally
for the world
to see the darkest piece of you. And I will never forget that. But that's where the shift started to happen for me. And I started to think to myself, I remember watching that little TV that we had, and I remember Sex and the City was on, which I love. Carrie, #Carrie forever.
Not a fan.
I love it. And I remember there's a line where she said, how do I reach the future if the past is still present? And it really struck me. Like, it was almost like, and that's the other thing I want to say is like, it's almost like the 12 steps are built into us already. Mm-hmm. They're like parts of our innate character and soul. Mm-hmm. And the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, or however you get those 12 steps, it just is tapping into something that's already there.
Yeah, it's nothing invented.
No.
It's nothing.
No.
It's the beam.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
we get so far off of the beam in life.
For sure.
This is just an avenue to get redirected back on the beam.
Yes.
Of where we're supposed to be anyway.
And I always talk about God or my higher power or any of that. It's really just my higher self, right? It's really the person, the thing behind my ego. And it may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things.
Yeah.
I just remember starting to think like that mustard seed of, could I do something different? And it was like the first time I'd ever considered being sober, truly being sober, not like doing marijuana and Budweiser, like truly living a life, without alcohol or drugs. Yeah. It was the first time I started to consider it. And I had been in for about 60 days at that point. And the book cart came around, and I went ahead and plucked the NA and the AA book off the little book cart, and I put them under my pillow. I did not read them at all. Okay, I just want to be clear. Yeah, just osmosis. I did not read those books, but it was a little piece of action.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Little mustard seed. About 30 days later, my parents came to visit me. I had no idea where I was going to go when I got out. And they said, we're willing to let you come live with us, but you have to stay sober. And you have to follow all the, whatever your probation says. And that's where it began. I was released in, my dad picked me up. I had to put on my my hooker clothes.
That you got picked up in.
Correct. I'd put on about 15 pounds, so I was like fat guy in a little coat, had this little leather moto jacket, and I was like, I had these like little heels on. I was like click-clacking. I was like, this is terrible.
It is.
What a terrible time that was. That's a true story, too. And I had to walk out. My dad was in his little Honda Civic looking at me. I was like, it's me.
Right. I wasn't a guy that could sober up on the outside. Like, I had to be completely removed. I had to be in a structured, disciplined environment with no options. Right? So you did it.
Yeah.
How was that?
Yeah,
man?
I don't fully agree with that it has to be that way, Like, I think each person's experience obviously is their own, but I think that there's a lot of misconception and that you have to change people, places, and things in order to get and stay sober. And that's not true. I'm not saying it's probably not good, but it's not, everyone can't do that. So if someone can't do that, and not because they're making excuses, because there are people that'll do that and use anything to create a facade to fit their narrative.
Yeah.
That's not what I mean. I mean, if someone honestly cannot change people, places, and things, but really want to stay sober, don't tell them they're not going to be able to.
Right.
Don't set them up to fail, because my experience is that I moved into with my parents, my dad and my stepmom. My dad was an active alcoholic at the time. Every place I had to go for probation or whatever, all like the behavioral counseling I had to do, all within spitting distance of where I bought crack.
Like, that's tough.
It is tough.
That's tough.
But I'm telling you, something had happened to me. The obsession had been lifted. And I hadn't worked a step. So, I got out. I started going to, I had all probation had me going to was one meeting a week. One. And I did that for maybe the first 3 months. I worked. I got a job within 3 weeks of getting out of jail. I got a job working with my dad on a line building air conditioning compressors, making $7.25 an hour. All the meetings that I attended were all Club 101.
Right.
Come on, man. I literally, that was my favorite gas station, was the one right next to Club 101. They had the best glass roses and Chorboy and all that, the things I needed. So I literally went to meetings right next to a place that I frequented in my active addiction, Runberg's right up the road.
Yeah.
But again, I can't stress it enough. Something happened for me. And yes, I also had the looming consequences of, if you do not stay sober, you will go to state jail for 4 years.
Right. Texas state jail.
Yes. So I just started the process, but something had happened for me. And I can't explain that. And I'm so grateful for it because I watch people struggle. And I started going to meetings. I got a sponsor and I started working the steps. And it's really where it all shifted for me. And I did that for the first 2 years, and then I started working in recovery, working in a recovery center that, was controversial at the time.
Mm-hmm. They were taking a lot of arrows.
Taking a lot of arrows for something that is now on every corner.
Yeah.
And I mean, the recovery community did not love Mark Houston Recovery at the time. And they thought that we were getting paid to do 12-step work. And I was like, we're doing a lot more than that there. Mm-hmm. And we were. And it was a magical fucking place. Mm-hmm. And I'm so grateful that I had the time there that I did.
I saw a lot of people get well there.
Yep.
And there's a lot of people that went through there that are now assisting other people to get
Absolutely.
well 15 years later.
Absolutely. I'm one of them, and I didn't even get the opportunity to go through there.
Yeah.
Mark Houston saved my life.
Yeah.
Just by working there. I remember that process, and so many levels, hitting so many levels of things I never thought I would do. And that is another thing that recovery has given me is thank God I didn't get what I was hoping for.
Yeah. What is the greatest gift of sobriety that you didn't see coming?
I think the greatest gift becoming such an integral part of my family. They used to live without me. They could. Mm-hmm. And now I don't think they could. You know what I mean? I think that we are locked in, and I didn't know that it would be like that. The gift of authenticity. I don't have to hide, who I am.
Authentic.
Yeah.
Being authentic.
Yeah. Talking about some of these topics, we talk freely about it. And I know that maybe outside of this, some people will be shocked by some of the things that we've discussed easily here. Mm-hmm. And I understand that. But I think that there needs to be, the stigma needs to be removed a little bit from it, to give people, I'm not ashamed of my history. Mm-hmm. I don't feel any shame about it. I worked through all that. I did my work. Yeah. And if you're experiencing some judgment or some shame, that's your work to do. Mm-hmm. It's not mine. I did mine.
You know what comes up for me? My dad died in January, and I'm like in his office all the time. That's my office, and it's not my office, but I'm there doing the work and handling the estate and taking care of things that he was taking care of. Mm-hmm. And some of it's quite a bit. And he had even more years ago when I was in active addiction. And just there's things that I realize now that were not on my amends, that I wasn't aware of when I was making amends to them. It just really hit me of, man, the chaos and the distractions and the headache that I put onto them that I didn't even consider.
Sure.
With him being gone, and my mom has Alzheimer's, so it's like carrying on a conversation with her doesn't exist.
Sure.
Is that I find myself inside just wanting to say, I just wish that 5 more minutes, like the song 5 more minutes, but really 5 more minutes to be able to say, I realize so much more harms that I did to you that I'm so, so sorry about. Mm-hmm. Not sorry, but because we've been saying sorry, but just I wish that I could share with you, that I get it, Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes sense.
Of course it does. Of course it does. And I'm sure. But again, I think you wanting to be able to say that to him is about you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Definitely.
And so the gift is that you've seen it.
Yeah.
That's the gift.
Yeah.
And you get to see that you've seen it.
Yeah.
And you get to have that experience, and you get to just wake up just a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if you believe in heaven, or you believe in, the other worlds and all of that, then your dad knows that you see it.
Yeah. Oh, it was 100% about me. All of that was 100% about me. But it's, there was some regret that had creeped in.
Yeah. Of
But
course.
But yeah, I mean, we can, when we're in sobriety, I mean, you and I both, I think that, it doesn't mean we're always going to show up like a shining light. Mm-mm. But when we recognize it, even that in itself is growth, because, man, I walked for years and didn't even have a clue how I was showing up.
Yep.
Thank you all so much. Always remember to be good to yourselves. Stay tuned. We got more stuff coming up. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Take it easy. Till next time.